Well, Dave, yesterday we had some fun. We were taking a peek at some defensemen that the Maple Leafs could go after. Today, we're going to chat about how the Leafs can open up some cap space to make some of these moves. Whether it's talking about some of the players that could potentially be traded with those guys, some guys who maybe you could buy out of our contract. Just some ways that the Leafs can open up some cap space and make some moves this offseason. We're also going to have a quick discussion about game two of the Western Conference Final and talking about some of the biggest fan fouls that occur at sporting events, because maybe one of the most egregious things I've seen in a very long time occurred last night. We're going to play it, we're going to show it, and we've come up with our own list of the biggest fan fouls as well. So, all that and more on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother from TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me is my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. And if it's your first time, also go ahead and you can find us on YouTube as well and subscribe there via audio and video format. Dave, I am so rattled, but just before we hopped on, so we were discussing, okay, what are we going to talk about today? And one of the things, so in our Discord channel, we threw out some of the names and players that we were thinking that we used for yesterday's podcast to potentially trade for some acquisitions. And in the graphic we used, there was obviously the cost of the contract that was in there. And then I saw some comments say, well, how are you going to afford those guys? Well, we explained that in a way in yesterday's podcast. So if you want to know some of the players and some of the deals that we proposed, you can go check out yesterday's pod. But as for what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the guys who potentially could be expendable for the Maple Leafs to open up cap space, whether that's, a trade asset, somebody who maybe you can buy out and increase their cap space. That's going to be the premise of today's pod. But then I saw something on Twitter and it really set me off for a moment. So before we get into that, we got to get into this video that is circulating, Dave. Why don't we go ahead and pull it up right now? We're going to play it, and we're going to talk about some of the biggest fan fouls that you can do at an arena. And this, to me, right up there. I haven't seen something this brutal in my life. So this is at a Cubs game at Wrigley Field, one of the best ballparks in history. Looks like they're creating some sort of awesome pyramid with all the beer cups that everybody had drank in the section. And they're so close. It looks like they only need a couple more beers before they can finish off their tower, their pyramid, and then hit play there, Dave, for those on
Had
YouTube.
a couple opportunities tonight to really open this game.
This gentleman,
Sir.
oh, God.
Had a couple opportunities tonight to really open this game. There we go.
Man, that's so upsetting. So for those who are listening via audio and didn't quite see that, the gentleman, which I believe he may have been security,
Yeah,
walked over.
security or he was working
Yeah.
in the section.
Yeah, but this thing was like a 5-6 foot tall beer cup tower that they had made, and they're pretty close to finishing it off. And then this gentleman comes over, this donkey, I like to call him, there's no fun police, and knocks it all over, just starts tipping the cups over, and the whole thing falls down. And everyone's like, dude, come on. Like, I mean, is that really a safety hazard? I mean, you're in the middle of a ball game. There was nobody in front of the seats. Like it honestly, I don't think it was needed. It was extremely unnecessary, and it just rattled me that guy did that. That's so terrible.
Oh no, it's egregious. Like, there's only a few things you can do as a fan to have, some fun that's not harmful, right? So good fun. You know what? Like, we're gonna talk about fouls. I don't think this is a foul, but like the long snake of cups,
Yes.
like those are cool. Those are cool
Yes.
things.
That's
Like,
maybe the coolest thing about, the second installment of the XFL. I think they did that in Washington, the Commanders. They
mm,
had the snake, and they tried to go all the way from the bottom of the 100 section all the way up to the top of the 100 section. Everyone's supposed to put their beer and see how long they can make the beer snake. No harm, no foul.
honestly, like what exactly? Like, unless somebody complained and said, you know what, this beer thing is getting in my way, I can't see. But like, you see the people there, they're just like, come on, man. Like, we're just trying to have some fun here. Like, I'm gonna point this out too. This is a pretty young group of people in this
Yeah.
section. It's not like a bunch of older people too. Like, this is a young group. This is what they do. And the funny part is like how like nonchalantly he does it, and everything just comes apart. Like, he doesn't go for like a big whack. He's just like,
Oh,
fing, you know.
one little cup. Just one cup, one cup, one cup. The whole thing came tumbling down like Jenga. Oh, it was so upsetting to watch. But that inspired us to kind of talk about some of our biggest fan fouls. So, you and I, we've been to some games, whether it's a hockey game, football game, baseball, basketball, whatever it may be. We've been to plenty. I'm sure you guys
Well,
listening or watching also been to a lot of sporting events. And they're just some fan fouls that, not that they necessarily like irk you, but it's just like, man, that's a foul. That's a fan foul. And we've put together our list of what we believe to be 5 of the biggest fan fouls out there. And the first one for me is raining on someone's parade unnecessarily, which is exactly what that guy did. Like, did you really have to go over and tip over these guys? It's like if you're building a house of cards, and like when you're younger, and your sister comes over and just flicks a card and the whole thing comes tumbling down, and you're just like, what the hell? I was so close to finishing that. I've worked all game to put together this beer tower, and you came 1 second, one flick, and ruined all my hard work. And why? For no reason. Totally unnecessary. The guy's a doink. And when you're raining on people's parades for no reason, I can't stand it. It's such a foul to me. Such a foul.
I know I cannot. Like, you know what? Baseball's a long game too. Like, it takes a long time to watch a baseball game. You don't think people are trying to find different ways to entertain themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I think of that. But you want to go through a couple of other ones?
Yeah, go ahead. Shoot off one that's a big foul for you.
Big one for me. I was at a Jays game last year. Close score, 8th inning. And I see people at the dome doing the wave. Now, I'm not totally against the wave. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not saying it should be banned. I'm not one of those people. I just don't see the point of it. But when you do it in a close game and your pitcher is on the mound, you deserve to be kicked out of the game.
See, that's somebody who knows proper etiquette. Like, that's you're a guy who knows how the game is played, and you know proper fan etiquette. But there are a bunch of people who just go to the game and they're just there to have fun. And to them, it's like 8th inning, woo! They've already got a few beers inside them. They're not thinking, oh, maybe this will throw off my pitcher, so I'll wait until the next half inning, which is what a smart baseball fan would think about. Which, to be honest, maybe that's only 25% of the people in that building most of the time, I would argue. So that's a good one right there. Is, yeah, just not having the wherewithal to realize when to do the wave. And in a tie game in the 8th inning when your pitcher's up there, not an ideal time. You're right. That's a foul. That's a foul for sure. The wave in general, though, I don't mind it. Just because I think if you don't want to participate, you stay in your seat. It doesn't bother you. But again, if you potentially are catching the eye of your own pitcher and it's ruining him for whatever reason, I guess you are impacting others. So then that's where I have a problem with it. But if you're doing it to the other pitcher, the other side, hey, fair game, fair game. But yeah, it's a good one for me. It's random Jersey guy. I remember being at I think I was at a Bills game actually, and I just saw like a random Darcy Tucker jersey at a Bills game. And I'm like, what the hell does Darcy Tucker have to do with anything? He's not a football player. He didn't even play at Buffalo. And it wasn't even a Sabres jersey, a Darcy Tucker Leafs jersey that has nothing to do with football. So, like, the random jersey guy or like wearing a Stephon Diggs jersey to a Leaf game, like, no. You want to wear Josh Allen to a Leaf game? No, you're not doing that. Even you're not even doing it to an Argos game. It makes absolutely no sense. A random jersey guy to me is a bit of a fan foul.
No, bigger one, half and half jersey.
Oh, that's just yes, 100%. Who actually does that though? Like, unless you're a family member, do people actually do this?
Okay, so we're big Italians here.
Bisons. See,
Okay, I'm okay with. I have a friend she's Italian. Her partner is from England. He's British. They have a kid. So she's like, "What do we do?" Right? Like they're both big soccer fans too. I'm like, "Well, this is what you got to do. You have one jersey for one half, one jersey for the second half." Cuz she's like, "Oh, we might just have to do the double, like we have to just put two together." And I said, "If you do that, I will call you out on it. I will I'm not going to let you do that to this kid." They finally they took my advice and they wore the kid wore two different jerseys, and then he got to win the Italia one at the end because Italy won.
but even the Italia one, or nothing, but like wearing two different jerseys to me is also a bit of a foul. Like, actually, did this not happen last year in the playoffs? Somebody had a Leafs jersey and a Habs jersey, and whoever scored, like he had a Leaf jersey on. If the Habs scored, he took it off and had the Habs jersey going, and he stood up and celebrated. Like he had two jerseys on, one underneath the other one. So whenever something good happened for that team, he would be in that jersey to celebrate. So that too, I think, is a bit of a jersey foul. Yeah, pick one team, Dave. You pick one
Well,
team.
but when you're like an infant and your parents are fighting over which jersey you wear, you just gotta make it easy on the kid.
Well, you rock, paper, scissors your significant other, and you see who wins. If you lose, unfortunately, that god awful English kit will have to be on your baby, but hopefully you win, and the beautiful Italian Forza shirts will be donned on your baby. That's the way it goes. I'm sorry, you're not doing this nonsense. One half, the other half. No, no, God, no. That's a foul too, Dave.
All right.
Terrible advice. You gave her terrible advice, pal.
I was trying to steer away from the two jerseys in one. Okay.
No, you gotta
I was
pick
already.
one. Gotta pick one. Gotta pick one. How would you feel if you went to a Leaf game and you saw somebody doing that who had in the first period they tossed on a Leaf jersey, and then the second period they're like, nah, tell you what, a Leafs Gilmore jersey, and then they tossed on a Habs Gilmore jersey directly after for the second period, and then whoever was winning going into the third kept that jersey on just to make sure that they got the dub. How would you feel if you saw that happen?
I hate you.
Exactly.
You knew I would not like that.
Exactly, because that's just stupid. That is terrible advice, Dave. Um, one other one that is a massive foul to me, getting belligerently drunk and making a scene. And if you recall a few years ago, I think it was 2014, let's pull this up. There was an incident in Ottawa at a Sens Leafs game. Let's play it here for the YouTube audience, and I'll take the sound off so I can just talk over it. There's also might be some swearing in the video, which we don't want to do here. So for those watching, you're looking at happen. So there was an altercation with a Leaf and a Sens fan, and then the other guy's buddy dumps a beer on the Sens fan's head, and then they start fighting, and then all of a sudden the dude jumps and they tackles him down the stairs. And I'm sure
he got
something happened.
pulled a little bit too.
But back that up to the 25-second mark where things kind of started to get out of hand.
There's the dumping of the beer.
And then here's the couple of punches, and then here you see the
I
Leaf
think he
fan.
got pulled. I think he got pulled, man. I don't think he jumped.
Maybe who pulled him? The Sens fan pulled
Yeah,
him?
the Sens fan kind of pulled him, and I think the momentum, maybe he was trying to go for like a punch or something, and he got pulled, It looked like he got pulled there.
Yeah, that might have been what happened. If you're driving right now and you're listening to this, when you get a chance safely when you're pulled over, or when you get to your destination, look up. I guess it's Fight in Stands Leafs Sens game. You'll be able to watch this video. It is incredible. Actually, no, go to our YouTube page and go to about 15 minutes into the video, and then you can watch it here on Locked On Leafs YouTube. That's how you're going to do that. Don't give other people clicks. Give us the clicks.
Exactly.
But like that is a complete fan foul. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
People
Making
who fight at sporting
capture-
events just in general, it's ridiculous, man. It's
like
ridiculous.
it is, and like it's all fun and games if you're like chirping each other in fun in jest, but to take it that far where you're kind of getting aggressive with each other, and then there's some shoving, and then someone dumps a beer on you, and I mean that's like a $17 beer in this country. That's insane. That's, by the way, alcohol abuse. I'll say that. And then to obviously start a big fight like that, massive, massive foul. So, yeah, if you are any of these, my advice to you is stop doing any of this stuff because people aren't fans of you at sporting events if you're doing any of this. Like I remember being it was at a Bills game actually, and there was a guy in front of us who was just belligerently drunk, and it was like four dudes I think and their wives, and you could tell that the wives weren't really into it, but they were there just for the party to have have a little fun with the boys, and it was like four college buddies, and so it wasn't going well anyways, and this guy was just slurring all over the place, swearing, his ass was hanging out, and it was just so embarrassing for this guy. All the girls were so grossed out by him, like the other girlfriends that were there, and like eventually security came and just like kicked this guy out because he could barely stand. He kept falling over on all the girls. It was disgusting, and that is the type of fan foul that we're talking about. It's fun to go and get drunk and have some fun, but don't get belligerent and don't be an idiot. That's not what anybody wants. That's not for public. That's for sure. So that there it is, the biggest fan fouls. That was just kind of a random topic, impromptu topic there, but hey, it is what it is. Before we continue and get into ways for the Maple Leafs to open up some cap space, let me tell you guys all about betonline.net. It's your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sport developments, news, odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn about the trends in action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. Dave Morassutti with me. We're your hosts here of Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, and we're still on our road to 1,000. We've eclipsed the 900 sub mark, so we are so close. If it's your first time listening, I'd really appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe to the podcast because we do put out new content each and every day, Monday through Friday, whether it's Leafs related or just hockey related in general, or just some stupid stuff we saw on the internet that we can relate to sports and just go behind the scenes, get to know us a little bit, like we just did in that first segment. But let's get to some Leafs content now, Dave. I think we're almost 20 minutes into the pod. Let's get real dirty into our Leafs talk. And what we're talking about today is just some ways that the Maple Leafs can open up some cap space, whether it's guys that they could trade or players that they could buy out. Just ways that they can open up cap to be a little bit more flexible and do something through the offseason because they only got about 7 and change in terms of cap space. And if they can move some of these guys around or potentially buy somebody out, you can open up some more space, and maybe that gives you an opportunity to make an additional signing or trade. So here are a couple of players that we believe are somewhat expendable and would be the Leafs may be open to moving this offseason in order for them to make some additional moves. So the first one that I think we should probably talk about is Alex Kerfoot. I think that's the first guy in terms of a guy who it could have some trade value still and is not a complete guy who you need to get off the books. I mean, Mrazek is somebody who it's going to cost you an asset. I don't think Kerfoot's going to cost you an asset, but he makes $3.5 million, and I think that he could probably still fetch you something. I don't think it'll be a great pick or prospect or a bottom of the roster type of player, but it's not going to cost you anything to get out of that $3.5 million contract going into next season, and that's a decent chunk that you can make some alternative moves with that type of cap space.
Exactly. Like we're talking about finding value, right? Because the Leafs are top heavy. They got a lot of guys making a lot of money in a lot of different positions. Having Alexander Kerfoot at 3.5 million, and he didn't have the playoff I expected him to have. He was really good last year. It felt like this was a bit of a letdown for him. So yeah, like you need to get the most out of every dollar you're spending. And if we're going to be critical about guys who didn't step up, Kerfoot, yeah, he's not making the tens of millions of dollars that the other guys are making, but he's still making a fair chunk of change. And I'm just going through his stats right now. He had 51 points, which was a career high. Sorry, 51, which is that's really good for Alexander Kerfoot, a guy who's kind of was yo-yoed up and down the lineup. But then in the playoffs, 2 points in 7 games after he had 6 in 7 the year prior. So
And was
not
costly defensively as well.
exactly right. So this is where I think the Leafs need to get a different presence if they're going to use that money. And I think, yeah, Kerfoot would be an easy one to move off from.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where I see him in this lineup like that. It doesn't fit like a glove anywhere. I don't like him on the second line with Tavares and Nylander. I don't necessarily like him in a checking role on the third line. I think paying $3.5 million for a fourth line guy is just a little bit too much money to pay. I understand he's going to kill some penalties for you and maybe play in your second power play unit. So he has some special teams value as well. But at the end of the day, I think you could probably get somebody who could do a lot of those things for a cheaper price. Quite frankly, who also can do a lot of things that Kerfoot does. So that's one guy who we're talking about. And if you're thinking about, well, what's it going to cost as a buyout? He only has 1 year left. Maybe you could buy it out. Nah, you're not getting enough savings.
No.
It's still going to cost $3 million on the books this year, and then another $500,000 next year. So you're saving $500,000 on the cap this season. You're not even going to get an actual player to replace him for that type of money. So a buyout to me is out of the picture. You got to trade him away. But again, I think that there's positive trade value here as opposed to the next guy let's talk about in Mrazek, where you're going to have to give up an asset to move this player. He's got 2 years left on his deal at $3.8 million bucks. And I anticipate like it would kind of be a failed offseason if Peter Mrazek isn't dealt, wouldn't you say?
I think so. I know in the Discord there's some people who have been big on defending Mrazek and saying, this was the worst he's looked. The issue isn't just performance, it's injuries.
Durability, which
Yeah,
has been a massive problem for him his entire career.
exactly. So this is where the Leafs have to they got to go. I mean, they can go cheaper in goaltending too, right? That's a significant investment. If you're trying to go and get another guy, why do you need to spend that much on a guy who hasn't been dependable enough, both performance and just staying healthy? It was unfortunate that it's a 3-year deal. I didn't like the 3 years when they signed it. I wasn't even a fan of the cap hit. I understood why, because goaltending has been tough to find, especially in free agency. And they were trying to, and Campbell was cheap enough. They're like, okay, I can see where that makes it work, but can't be. Yeah, I can't see Campbell returning. I think, and you have to be very careful. Some people are like, oh, they're gonna have to move a significant pick. I don't think so either. Like, this isn't a Patrick Marlowe type deal where you have to shed $6 million in cap space. 3.8 over 2 years, that's tough. But I think there's some teams that will do it for the right deal.
It's 3.8 cap hit. but it is 8.6 in total salary that you'd be moving on from, and it's all base too, no signing bonuses. So that's where it does get a little bit interesting. You're going to have to pay up a little bit more because the team that's taking him in is actually paying him a lot of money. Like that's $4.2 million that they're going to have to pay him in base salary this season, and 4.4 million next season, and just a 3.8 cap hit. Typically, teams who are making deals like this are want guys with a higher cap hit but lower base salary, and there's not even a signing bonus so that they could trade it like after July 1 when those bonuses are paid out to make it a little bit cheaper. It's all base, and that's what makes this a bit of a more difficult trade. And if that is the case, if he's not able to find a trade, um, the buyout is possible with Mrazek. I'll say that it's possible. I think you would prefer a trade, obviously, but I think it would depend on what that asset would be. Like if teams are looking for that first round pick and they're looking for that Patrick Marleau type of acquisition cost to bring in Mrazek, I don't think that like you essentially need to weigh it out. What's more valuable to you, that 25th overall pick, a first round pick, or the cap space that the dead cap space that you'll have if you buy him out? That's what you get. Your Kyle Dubas is going to have to weigh out. So for Mrazek, if you did want to buy him out, you would save $2.7 million this year, 2.9 million next year, but then he would be on the books for the 2 following years at $1.4 million. So you're getting the immediate cap savings, but it's also going to be on the books a little bit longer. So it's not perfect. Obviously, it's not ideal, but I would say that Peter Mrazek, I'd be shocked if he is a Toronto Maple Leaf come come puck drop of opening day.
Yeah, I for me, it's also I don't like. I hated the idea of going first round pick for the Marvel thing because that was a top 15 pick, right? It was a
Turn into Seth Jarvis.
right. I'd rather take Seth Jarvis and then you figure it out with Patrick Marleau for another year. It just set the wrong precedent too with other teams that are thinking, you paid a first round pick to get rid of Patrick Marleau. Why do you think we're going to make it any easier on you this time around? Like it's almost like that sort of thing. So I'm all for, if they have to do the buyout, you just have to eat the cost, fine, but only if it's the last option possible.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think if they're asking for like a B level prospect and like a third round pick, then I would probably give up that asset. A first round pick, I'm holding firm, not giving that up. I would rather take the hit 2 years from now, but also still leaving 2.7 and roughly $3 million this year and next by making the buyout, and hopefully the cap goes up 3 years from now, and it's that 1.4 isn't necessarily as big as a chunk as it seemed like it would be now. So it kind of does work out that way a little bit, where that's when it's projected to take a little bit more of a leap. Sans past COVID, so potentially that could be a situation here. All right, let's take one more break. When we get back, we got 2 more names that we can discuss here that the Maple Leafs could use as either trade away or a potential buyout to try and open up some cap space for this upcoming season. So we'll do that when we return. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You listen to Locked On Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into Locked On Leafs. I'm Mike DiStefano. Got Dave Morassutti with me. We're going through ways for the Maple Leafs to open up some cap space going into next season. We've already talked about Alex Kerfoot, and if they could move on from his $3.5 million salary, that would be a benefit to Kyle Dubas and the salary cap. Also, Peter Mrazek's $3.8 million salary for this year and next year as 2 other guys who they could move to open up cap space. We have 2 more players, both of which on the blue line, that we want to discuss today. Dave, which one do you want to tackle first here?
Let's tackle Justin Holl.
Okay, let's do it. Justin Holl, $2 million, which isn't a lot of money. But if you are looking to open up to Schmil, if you believe that that Timothy Liljegren is ready to be an everyday guy, and If Holl is not going to be in your top 6, that seems like quite a lot of money to pay for your 7, right? So that would be the reason why you would try and move on from Holl, I would think, because as of now, you're thinking Brody is going to be one of the guys, and then potentially Brody in your first or second pair, and then you're going to have Liljegren, and then Holl would be the third guy. You want that? I don't know. It depends on what they end up doing, I suppose. But that's $2 million that they could get off the books. I think it's. I don't know, do you see Holl leaving? I don't know where I'd sit with Justin Holl. I'm a little bit more bullish on him than most people.
I just think it was disappointing because the Leafs basically decided Justin Holl over Jared McCann. I
Yeah,
hated that thought process. Kyle Dubas came out and said, "Well, where are you going to find a defenseman that's going to play in your top 4, top penalty kill unit, and only cost you $2 million?" And I said, "And we seriously can't find like other defensemen to fill those roles, right? We're talking about putting it all on one defenseman who struggled as a top 4, and then in the season he struggled. Kyle Dubas came on and defended him. Then he struggled in the playoffs. Sheldon Keefe came to his defense, well, mainly because of how the question was presented, more so than the performance of Justin Holl. But what I saw this year was you have Timothy Liljegren able to step in and play a decent. No, he can play in your. Is he a top 4 defenseman? Maybe, but if you're asking me, would I rather have Justin Holl or Timothy Liljegren in my top 6? I'm going to take the younger guy. I'm going to take the guy who, frankly, gives me a higher ceiling when he's on the ice. And he needs a new contract. And I would hate that the reason why he might not be like things get a little tight with the budget is because you have a Justin Holl on the roster
right.
who's not as good. He is what he is right now. He's not going to get any better, in my opinion. He is what he is. And I don't think his play is going to significantly improve to the point where you're like, we have to keep this guy around. I think you can find younger, and look, they're going to be bringing in younger guys too eventually. Niemela is going to come in. They got a bunch of guys that they've drafted. You got to start finding some of those guys to come in cheaper and providing a little more to the back end, in my opinion.
Yeah, the only Justin Holl does bring a little bit of jam, which a lot of these other guys don't necessarily. Like Topi Niemela is not someone who brings a whole lot of jam. He's more of a skill defenseman, right? So that's where it's like, if you don't bring back Labushkin, can you afford to lose both of those guys? I mean, if they bring back Labushkin, yeah, sayonara, Justin Holl, absolutely don't need him at all. But if you don't, I don't know if he necessarily goes, but if they do need to open up cap space, he is somebody who is definitely in the conversation at least of being expendable. I don't think you would need to buy him out. I would assume there would be guys, multiple people willing to take on a Justin Holl because he is still at the end of the day a third pair defenseman. I don't think you can really dispute that he can't play third pair minutes. And we see a guy like Cody Ceci who's actually playing half decent over in over at Edmonton. That guy got $3.5 million last year. Tucker Poolman got $2.5 million in Vancouver last year. You can bring in a Justin Holl for $2 million to play in your third pair who can kill you at penalties. I think that there would be a lot of teams who'd be looking to bring that in. So I don't think that they would even have to consider a buyout. But just for the sake of letting the numbers, letting you guys know what the numbers would be, they would save $1.3 million in cap this season, but it would cost them $600,000 in cap next season if they were to buy him out this year. But I don't think that's necessary to be perfectly frank with you. So that leads us to the final player, and it's a slightly controversial one. It's Jake Muzzin, who's part of this leadership core that Kyle Dubas talks about having all the time. We always refer to it as kind of the core 4 or now the core 5 with Muzzin or with Riley being signed, but he refers to it as more of a general core. And Muzzin's one of those guys. He's somebody who's, he alternates wearing an A on his sweater sometimes. The problem with Muzzin is A, he's got a no trade clause. And B, they like him a lot. So I don't really know if they will trade him again, similarly to Justin Holl. But opening up $5.625 million in cap space, if they can move on from Jake Muzzin, would definitely help out to alleviate the cap pressure that they're going to be under this offseason.
I'm going to bring up onto the screen here a little snippet from 32 Thoughts.
Oh, beauty.
Elliot Friedman talked about Rasmus Sandin. He's been kind of the big topic around town, especially with his contract coming up.
We talked about it like three times this week.
Yep. And we'll likely talk about it again.
Probably.
So the part here that I wanted to bring up was about Jake Muzzin. The Maple Leafs were very happy with Jake Muzzin's postseason performance, leading to a left side logjam with Muzzin, Sandin, Morgan Riley, Mark Giordano, and TJ Brody.
Are you able to highlight there what the part you're talking about? I don't know if you can do it.
Yeah, let's do that.
There we go.
So I think what this tells me here, the Leafs likely had thought about moving on from Jake Muzzin, but then they saw how he played in the playoffs. They saw how he played with TJ Brody this year. This was like the playoffs thing wasn't just a one-off. People have to remember that when Jake Muzzin was struggling with Justin Holl, they put him with TJ Brody, and then it just he was better, right? Yep. So I think they seriously thought about that and were like, you know what? We would prefer to keep Jake Muzzin because that's a tough contract to move. He's got a no trade as well.
Yeah.
Like that's not an easy contract to get rid of and move. So yeah, it's as Elliot Friedman says, it's a tight puzzle. It is very tough because you have so many left shot defensemen. It's just, yeah, Jake Muzzin makes, I think, what, 5.75 million? He's up
5.65.
5.65. That's a big chunk of change. But and I'm sure there's a team that would take it. But is it the team that he would waive his no trade clause to go to?
Yeah, there was some, I don't know where it came from, but I saw some rumblings on Twitter that he would be open to going back to LA. Like he would waive to go back there. So I potentially that's a landing spot for him. And that would make a little bit of sense. A team that, is younger, but they're kind of on the other side of their rebuild and they're trending towards, they just made the playoffs this year. So perhaps they want to get some of those guys back into the lineup, those veteran players. But ultimately, I don't know how many other teams, Jake Muzzin, who's from Southern Ontario, Woodstock guy, who is a leader in the dressing room and loves being a Maple Leaf for everything that I know about him, how willing he would be to leave a successful team here that does have Stanley Cup aspirations. I'm just not sold that that's a move that the Maple Leafs will want to make, and I'm not sold it's a move that Jake Muzzin is going to want to make either. So when we look at it, it seems as though Alex Kerfoot and Peter Mrazek are the two guys who are most expendable, you could say, and then potentially one of Justin Holl or Jake Muzzin, if the right deal were to arise, I think would be the way that we could see either of those two get moved, or if a certain free agent acquisition goes through and there's an opportunity for them to move on from a Justin Holl or something like that. But you move on from Kerfoot, you move on from Mrazek, you're picking up over an additional $7.3 million in cap space if you can find trades for those two players. And voila, you add that to the $7 million that they've got currently, and now you're looking at about 14 and change going into the offseason. Yes, it's true. You got a couple of RFAs that you still got to ink. You've got Andre Kasha that you got to get signed to a contract. You obviously have Rasmus Sandin, Timothy Liljegren that you got to get signed to a contract. And there's the goaltending that you're going to have to sort out by moving out Peter Mrazek, and we're assuming Jack Campbell. It sounds as though he will probably end up testing free agency, but at least you got some more money and cap space to make some other deals and make some other moves to try and either find another goaltender or find that top six forward who could be out there on the open market or in free agency this offseason by making those moves.
Yeah, and you have to be flexible, right? I think a lot of the talk has been the Leafs want to do something significant. Significant means also you have to be willing to move a pretty decent contract or bigger size contract. The little chips around the edge doesn't look like those are cutting it anymore. So I think that's and everyone's gonna say, oh, but the Leafs can only afford this and that. There's ways to do it. You just have to be willing to take a big swing, and that includes moving out a sizable deal to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you actually pull up that Elliot Friedman piece? Because there was a Campbell
Yeah.
little comment there too that we might as well chat about quickly before we head out here. Um, I'll read it out to our listening audience. As for Jack Campbell, the last I'd heard is there hadn't been any contract conversations for months, and anything that was discussed, I'd heard the two sides were far apart. Was in the words of one source, quote, no longer relevant. All his agent, Kurt Overhart, would say is there's been no material contract negotiations since the end of the season. Doesn't sound like Jack's coming back, pal. Doesn't sound like Jack will be back.
Unless one side decides to move an inch, although it sounds like it's more than an inch.
It
It sounds
does. There's a couple feet there. It sounds like between those parties.
so. Yeah, I'm preparing for a new goaltender tandem going into next season.
Yep, and like we said, next week we can dive into it. We talked about trade proposals for defensemen yesterday. You got to go check out that podcast. There was a blockbuster that was unreal, and I want to get everyone's thoughts on that. So you can go check that out either through audio or video form on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. But next week, I think we got to look and do some trade proposals, some blockbusters perhaps, but some trade proposals at the very least for goaltenders, if that's the case. Let's see if we can bring in a goalie of the future, or a goalie that might be able to get this team over the hump for next season. We'll also look at some forwards, both top six and bottom six. So that's kind of what we'll be dealing with next week, Dave, just as a little precursor for what to expect here on the Locked On Leafs pod for next week. That's going to do it for us here today, though. I'd like to thank everybody and appreciate it for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Also follow the show at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, smash that like button. If you're on YouTube, go ahead, leave us a 5-star review, potentially. If you're listening via audio format, leave a comment down below, your thoughts on what we had to say today. And what's your biggest fan foul when you're at a sporting event? Or what's the biggest fan foul that you've seen occur at the very least? Appreciate everybody for all the love that we've been given the last couple of days. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow, but until then, no, Monday. It's Friday. We're off for the weekend.
You can do an episode. I'm gonna take the weekend.
We're off for the weekend. We'll be back on Monday, but until then, keep locked right here on Locked On Leafs.